If you're a fan of the Silver and Black Pride podcast network, you might be familiar with Evan Groat, who joins me now. Hey, Evan, what's going on?
How you doing, Carolyn? Happy to be here with you, and thanks for having me on.
Of course. So the Just Pod Baby podcast, I know you guys do a lot of Raiders talk. You talk about a bunch of different things. I want to start with the pass rush. Could not get anything going in the fourth quarter or in overtime against Kyler Murray in what was ultimately a really tough loss against Arizona. But against a Titans offensive line that's a little bit more porous, do you expect the Raiders to get the pass rush going this week?
Yes, absolutely. That's got to be one of the keys to the game this week for the Raiders. The Titans left tackle, Taylor Lewan, left last week's game against Buffalo with a knee injury, and I saw he did not practice on Wednesday. So they have a former 6th-round draft pick filling in for him right now. And this is a game where Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, guys who got themselves pretty big-time deals in the offseason, need to step up and make some impact plays, and I do think it'll happen this week.
If they can't get it going against an offensive line like this, how concerned should Raiders fans be about that?
They should be very concerned because, we're 2 games in now, only 1 sack between the two of them. And I know Max Crosby is ranked amongst the NFL leaders in pressures, but sometimes it's more about just generating pressure. You got to get home and make those big impact plays. And I know there's some concern already, maybe even some criticism already with Chandler Jones because he's really been kind of a non-factor so far in these first 2 games. And, you look at his age, he's 31 years old now. And some people will point out the fact that last year he had 10 sacks overall, but 5 of those sacks came in week 1. So there was a little bit of question marks about him coming into the season, but they both need to get it going. And if they don't get it going this week, then I think you're going to hear more and more chatter about, the lack of a pass rush by the Raiders.
Outside of the issues with pressure, Evan, what do you think ultimately went wrong in this collapse at the end of this game with Arizona?
Well, do we have enough time? There was a lot of things that went wrong. To me, I've seen a lot of, and I've read and I've listened to other media outlets out there. There's a lot of finger pointing going on right now. A lot of people are saying it's Derek Carr's fault. A lot of people are putting it on the head coach, and some people are putting it on the defense. To me, it was just a collective effort. It was a collective failure. You can't pin it on one player. The offense was on the field for 19 plays. Generated 48 total yards of offense, and the defense was on the field for 51 plays. Gave up several 4th down conversions, a couple 2-point conversions. It was just a perfect storm of poor offense and bad defense, and it's not complimentary football. You hear coaches talk about that a lot. The Raiders did not do that. So to me, it was a 100% a team loss.
Evan, you're talking about a team that, for all intents and purposes, on paper, had reason, I think, for Raiders fans to be excited heading into this season. I mean, you add a key offensive piece in Devontae Adams, you put some pieces around Derek Carr to make him feel more comfortable, and yet you mentioned complimentary football. You've got a situation where in critical situations in the fourth quarter and in overtime, it's bad decision-making, it's poor clock management, it's issues with the pass rush and the offense. I mean, how surprising is it to you that with the pieces that they have, that it seems like they are still being plagued by some of the bad decision-making that we saw last season?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the record being 0-2, I can't say that I'm that surprised. I mean, I didn't have them beating the Chargers. I did think they would beat the Cardinals, but I think what we're seeing is, and head coach Josh McDaniels talked about it on Monday when he met with the media, is that this team is going through a lot of growing pains right now. And it's something that I have talked a lot about on the podcast, is that there's a lot of new there's new philosophies on offense, there's new philosophies on defense, and there's a lot of new faces. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer to mesh. Now, hopefully for the Raiders' sake, it doesn't take too much longer because they're already 0-2 right now. They're going into a big game here to avoid 0-3, and they don't want to fall too far behind because in that AFC West division, you're going to find yourself looking up at the Chiefs and the Chargers, and by week 8, it could be too late. So they definitely have to get it turned around. Things need to start coming together. The quarterback and the head coach need to get on the same page.
It feels kind of crazy to say, hey, we're heading into 3, but is this a make or break game when it comes to the playoffs in terms of the division? But every NFL analyst that I've spoken to on SportsNet over the last couple of months, I mean, the first couple of minutes, we end up talking about this division and how tough it is and how these teams are going to beat each other up. And so, it's not crazy to think that the Raiders might be at the bottom of what is essentially a packed division, but how much room do they actually have if they're going to get into the playoffs? I mean, is this a scenario in week 3 where you're talking about a must-win game? Sounds like you say.
Yeah, it is crazy to talk about week 3 being a must-win game, but when again you mentioned the division, if you continue to lose and fall further behind, it's going to be very difficult to claw your way back within this division. And the analytics is not in the Raiders' favor as well, because since the league has gone to the expanded playoff format, no team that has started out 0-2 has made it to the playoffs. Now, I know it's a small sample size, but even going back to the 2018 season, there's only been 2 teams, the Texans and I believe the Titans, who have made the playoffs with a 0-2 record. So it's just not real common that you see that happen. Now, if they go to 0-3, those odds get even worse. So yeah, it really does look like it is a must-have game for the Raiders. Absolutely.
You mentioned kind of where the blame is being placed this early in the season. How much pressure do you feel like Josh McDaniels is already under as you sort of take the temperature of Raiders fans? I mean, you would think that you would give a new head coach a little bit of time, a couple of games to get adjusted. And you mentioned all the new pieces that they brought in, and there's a lot of chemistry issues. I mean, 3 weeks into this season, I'm still kind of thinking about the preseason and how the condensed version of that might have ultimately impacted some of these teams who quite honestly could have used that extra week, a little bit of extra time to kind of put all the pieces together. But is he feeling a lot of pressure right now, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Raider fan base is a very emotional fan base. So there are some people out there who are calling for his head already, believe it or not. But, I don't think he should be feeling any pressure. I mean, of course, it's not this ideal start that a new head coach wants to have, especially when you're taking over a team who won 10 games the previous year, made it to the playoffs, and they bring in a whole new staff, new president, new general manager. So, I'm sure he might be feeling a little bit of pressure, from the fan base and whatnot. But as far as his, he's got total support of the ownership and whatnot. And I do believe that he'll get things turned around. There's just too much talent on this team, especially on the offense, to not get it going. And so I believe this weekend's a good time to get that started. The Titans coming off a really brutal loss in Buffalo, so they're kind of licking their wounds, and I think the Raiders are going to be hungry to get that first win.
Do you get the sense that the Raiders fan base is divided when it comes to Derek Carr? He strikes me as something of a polarizing player, or a player that a lot of people just don't like because they just don't like him. I mean, where is Raider Nation in terms of throwing their support behind the quarterback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been a Raiders fan my entire life, and I have never seen a player as polarizing as Derek Carr. Really, it's divided if you either love him or really dislike him. And there's very few people that kind of fall in the middle. I like to believe that I'm kind of like that. I try to keep it as objective as possible. But I've never seen anything like it. Sometimes I think it's not deserved. But I do think when you look at this season, he is not the main problem, but he is part of the problem. He hasn't played great football, especially in the second half against the Cardinals, and he had the 3 interceptions in week 1. So he absolutely has to play better. I mean, we talked about the great teams in the division. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in the division as well that he's going to be kind of compared to all season long. So he really needs to get it turned around quickly as well.
Is it as simple as just a lack of execution in key moments for why so many people have this vitriol for him? Or have you been able to get to the bottom of this polarizing quality? Is it a little bit deeper than that?
Well, I think a lot of people point to his win-loss record, which I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's several games under 500, and lack of playoff wins. I mean, I know he was hurt back in 2016 when he had a phenomenal season and led the Raiders to the playoffs. Of course, he missed that playoff game versus the Texans, but they were not able to get back to the playoffs until last year. And of course, they weren't able to win that game. So, I think people look to the amount of money that he's made. He's gotten a couple different contracts. He's making a lot of money, and they feel as if maybe the results aren't there. So, I think that's kind of where the fan base is at.
When you look at this matchup coming into week 3 and analyze what the Titans are, what they can do and really what they can't do you see Josh Jacobs potentially getting loose for a really big effort this week?
Yeah, I think he could have a big game. You look back to week 1, Titans faced the Giants. Saquon Barkley had a huge game. I believe he had 164 yards rushing, and the Giants totaled 238 yards that game as a team. So, and Jacobs has looked good. In week 1, he just didn't get enough touches because of the fact that the Raiders were kind of playing from behind most of that game. But in week 2, he had 19 carries, 74 yards, and he looked good. He looked fresh. He looked healthy, which is always a big thing for him. And so I do think this is a game where the Raiders could get that run game going with Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I think anybody who plays fantasy may be circling this one as an area where we could see another performance like Saquon Barkley had, and maybe he gets loose and could have a pretty big day. But offensively, otherwise, what will you kind of be paying attention to, and where do you think Josh McDaniels will place the emphasis in this matchup? I mean, is it trying to kind of exploit the run game? Do you see him targeting certain receivers? How do you view kind of what the approach will be on Sunday against Tennessee to avoid going 0-3?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on which game film they're going to spend more time watching. Because if the coaches are studying week 1 film, it was Giants dominating them on the ground. But if you flip on the Bills game from Monday night, Josh Allen was able to do anything he wanted. I believe he had 4 touchdown passes, over 300 yards, and Stephon Diggs had a huge day as well. So it looks like they should be able to do a little bit of both should they want to. But what I'm looking for the most from this team is consistency. I want to see consistent offensive play for 4 quarters. I want to see them protect the ball. And I want to see them start to establish an identity, because right now, when I watch the games, I can't quite tell what it is that the Raiders want to do, what Josh McDaniels wants to do. What is the bread and butter of this offense? So that is something that I hope to see here occur this week.
Do you think that that's something that could be revealed this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I think after 2 games, they've had some inconsistent play. We've seen Derek Carr not look super comfortable within the offense. I think this week they need to emphasize that in practice and come out and show everybody this is who we are. This is the potential top 5 offense that everyone talked about in the offseason. And they got to put it out there on the field this week. So I do hope they, whatever it may be, if it's riding the arm of Derek Carr and taking advantage of all those pass catchers that he has, I want to see them go there. I want to see Davante Adams have a larger role in the game like he had in week 1, not in week 2. So I do believe that it can all come together this week.
Yeah, I know you're unbiased, especially trying to be objective with the pod and stuff. But I mean, as a lifelong Raiders fan, I'm just thinking naively as an outsider here. Like, if I'm a Raiders fan, I want the offensive identity to fully embrace Davante Adams, and I want to see Derek Carr air it out a little bit. A run game is great and balance is great, but it seems like there are so many pieces around him that could potentially complement him so well. I mean, as a lifelong Raiders fan, what do you want the offensive identity to be?
Yeah, well, when you go out and you give up a 1st and 2nd round draft pick and you extend a receiver like Davante Adams for 5 years, $140 million, who is arguably the best player at his position, you need to make him the focal point of your offense. So absolutely. And they're paying Derek Carr a lot of money too. So, the 2 highest paid players on the team, I believe, are Carr and Adams. So those 2 should be the focal point of this offense. They need to be showcased, and he needs to get more involved. So absolutely, I want to see them throw the ball a little bit more consistently. I want to see Davante Adams get more involved. And I also want to see some of those other great targets they have, Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller, get involved in the game plan as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll end with this, Evan, and then I'll let you go. You mentioned the consistency and just some of the decision making, some of those decisions you wish you would have had back, right? When you go back and you look at the tape and things you want to clean up. Is it your sense, because you're so close to the team, you really know this offensive and defense and what the team is ultimately trying to accomplish? Do you think that this Raiders team could potentially be 2-0 instead of 0-2, come down to just like a couple decisions and mistakes, or do they deserve to have this 0-2, potentially 0-3 record right now with the way that they've played?
Yeah, no, I think they're right where they should be. I mean, last week, don't get me wrong, that game was a game they should have won, but they didn't earn it out there on the field. So, I mean, in week 1, I felt the Chargers are a better team. They have a better roster. They have a better, offense, better defense. There's more depth. And so, again, that was a game they weren't expected to win. But last week against the Cardinals, they had a golden opportunity there and they let it slip away. So, you are what your record says you are. So, and they're 0-2 right now. Hopefully they avoid 0-3 and get a win this weekend in Tennessee.
Evan Groat, great to have you. Nice to meet you. It's really kind of refreshing to talk to somebody who knows the Raiders so well and can offer this kind of insight. If somebody wants to really dive a little bit deeper into the Raiders, tell them what they can find on the pod.
Yeah, I try to keep it objective, as I said, and I always feature a guest interview. I consider them to be A-list guests. So sometimes it's a player. I've had the opportunity to interview several players, but I put 2 episodes out a week, a recap show on Monday night, and then a game preview, which usually drops on Thursday night. So you can find me by subscribing to the Silver and Black Pride Podcast Network, and my Twitter is quite entertaining as well. I'm always speaking my mind on Twitter as well at eGroat5.
All right. We love that. And I'm sure Raiders fans just eat that up because, as you said, they always let us know what they're thinking. Yeah. Evan Groat, thanks so much for being with us.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.